Welcome back to the podcast, Beacon Hill Podcast. We're back after about 3 or 4 weeks off. It's good to be with you, Joel.
It's good to be back.
I was kind of looking here. Your hat and your mug kind of have a matching thing going on, unintentionally, as far as the colors go anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You got a new mug. Well, new to you.
Yeah.
I gave you a little gift over the summer.
I want to thank you for it. If you can't see it, Jake, he got to do the what mystical beast he is.
Yeah.
You were tuned into that episode, and I took the quiz after the episode was over, and I got a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So here I have this awesome mug.
And for those who are just listening, describe that mug for them, if you can find the words.
It's hard to describe the majesty and glory that I'm seeing, but the handle is a dragon that's green and gold, and it's against the mug that's this dark sky. There's some purple in there as well. It's twilight, I think.
Yeah.
And this is just something that is a blessing to me. And I feel bad. You got me a gift when really you should be receiving a gift. This is your birthday week.
Well, being with you is the gift, Joel. I'm just glad to be here today. And I'm pretty sure that mug is hand painted.
Yeah.
It looks like it. I can't say it's hand painted by a professional artist, although it might be. I don't know. But you talk about what a blessing it is, and I've yet to see you use it.
Well, it's because I'm not a real big hot beverage drinker.
Okay.
But I do occasionally partake when it's winter time, when it's really, really cold.
Well, I look forward to that then.
It's in my office displayed.
That's true. So,
dude, the steam, if it's hot,
dude, that would be
it'll
legit.
look like the dragon just like blew something up with fire.
Well, I was going to say it would be legit if it could come out of his mouth, the steam.
Yeah,
that would be crazy.
It might do that. We've not tried it.
Well,
it could do that.
Jake, his creature was a unicorn. And I found a unicorn that I was going to give you, but Hillary liked it so much she wouldn't let me give it to you. So,
dang.
Yeah. So I'll find you something else, though.
Well, that whole day, like the next day, I took a paper towel roll and I taped it to my forehead, and I was running around the house pretending.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Driving Monica crazy.
I'm glad you finally know what your mythical creature
Gotta
is.
lean into it.
Well, this week we're in Luke 14, we're talking about counting the cost, kind of thinking about in spiritual sense, obviously thinking about what you're getting into, what you're signing up for when you follow Jesus. And a lot of people don't think about that, and that's super important. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But I thought on a practical sense, there's a side of that we have to do for other things as well. I mean, Jesus uses some examples here in the passage about when we count a cost to build, make sure we have enough money to finish the project, those kind of things. So I was thinking about, even with life in general, there are probably some things that you've experienced in life that you would say, I did not know that I was signing up for that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I knew what to expect, but once I got in the middle of it, I didn't. What would be yours, that situation?
Yeah, so I've definitely experienced that. And the thing that came to mind is in high school, I played soccer. That was kind of my main sport. And at one point, we had a coaching change. And the coach that was the coach of the track team and cross-country team, he also began to coach the soccer team. And he tried to convince many of us to come and train with the track team. Just train. Sometimes he would give us some different drills to go through while the track team was doing their thing. But the idea was that I would, just condition and get in better shape for the fall, that coming fall. And so one day I showed up for practice, but there were tons more cars and people than I was used to. And I was like, what is going on? And I get there, and my coach throws me a uniform, which includes the shortest shorts I've ever put on. And I'll go to the bathroom and I change and I come out and he tells me, you're going to be running this relay race and you're going to be running the sprint. I had never, I'm blanking. What are they called? The starter things for a race where you put your.
Oh yeah, I know what you're
feet.
talking about, but I don't know what they're called.
I'd never been trained on like how to put my feet in there and what to start, and I just go and you know, put my feet in there and they like fire a revolver and I'm just running. And then
They're called starting blocks.
starting blocks. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I'd not been trained how to use the starting blocks. I had never, you know, there's proper form on how to like hand over the baton in a relay race.
Mhm.
And I had never done that before. And the only reason we didn't get last place was because another team dropped their baton.
Mm. So I'm curious, what team was it? Because you were homeschooled.
Yeah.
What team was it?
There.
Were you like a recruit that they were like secretly trying to like get on the team? They were like, man, that guy's got to be fast.
Right now in the cities, there are lots of homeschool teams. Like they get together and sometimes like even there are homeschool like co-ops and like in schools where the homeschoolers go, and like I went to school 2 days a week and did the rest at home. And they would have basketball teams and
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess bigger cities probably have more to offer at that. I know we locally here got some stuff, but I haven't really heard about track, but it may be here too. But yeah, well, so you competed.
I never did
got
again.
next to last place.
Yeah.
Would you say it was a mediocre experience, or you didn't like it at all?
I didn't care for it at all. No.
Well, that's unfortunate. You know, I talked a while back about a similar track experience where I knew I was competing, but they just threw me into something else. I had a similar thing happen at the same school, but with a different like club or whatever. So I had signed up for what's called Science Olympiad. And, you know, I'm just nerdy like that. And I had signed up to compete in the computer science division.
Sure.
I'm not fully sure what all that involved. I only did it 1 year, and it was like, you know, it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing there, you know, different types of competitions and things. But part of my issue was, so I signed up to compete. We went to I guess it was the state trials or tournament or whatever you call it. And they had all these different categories of things. And for whatever reason, they didn't have somebody to compete in chemistry in that division. And I think I've told this before. I don't know if I've told it here on the podcast or in church. But basically they said, hey, we need somebody to compete in chemistry. You're a warm body with at least a half of a brain. You can go and try to do that. So I remember I went in, chemistry lab. They've got the Bunsen burners, all these chemicals in front of me, powders, all this stuff. They give you this worksheet, and you have an hour to work on it. I started looking at this worksheet. I don't have a clue what's on there. And I don't know what chemicals are in front of me. Like, you know, clearly they're labeled and stuff, but I don't remember this day what they were. But I don't know what, like, reactions some of them got. I couldn't pronounce the names of some of them, the powders and things, all of that. But anyway, I needed to look like I knew what I was doing. So the timer started, and I lit my Bunsen burner, and I put my little beaker on top of it, and I just started mixing some stuff, you know? I had to look like I knew what I was doing.
Sure.
So I was pouring some powders, pouring some liquids, and making some steam, you know?
Yeah.
And then I just guessed on a bunch of the answers on the worksheet and turned it in after about 30 minutes. So, you know, looking back, that could have been a disaster.
Sure.
But I knew where the eye wash station was and the shower and all that stuff, so I was all right.
You create some kind of like poisonous gas.
Yeah.
People
I think,
start falling.
isn't there an episode of Boy Meets World or something like that where somebody blows up the chemistry lab?
I don't know what show
It's either
it
that
is,
or
but
Family Matters or something like that. Somebody blows up the lab.
Yeah.
Or I could have been like, I definitely remember Family Matters where Urkel pours the liquid into his chamber and turns into Stefan Urkel or whatever it
Yeah.
is, you know.
You would turn into JG.
Yeah, I mean, it would be Gigé, you know.
Gigé.
It would be like the French version
Gigi
of it.
Fermer.
But anyway, so
I'm glad you're alive.
yeah, me too. And, you know, we didn't place or do anything fantastic in that. My guesses were not right, but, you know, it is what it is. And it's the life experience. And you learn that you need to really understand what all you're signing up for when you sign up for something.
Very true.
That's true. Well, to bring it back, reel it back, you look like you had something on your mind, Jake. Were you going to say something?
Nope.
Oh. You just always look like you have something on your mind, man. You're just a thinker.
He's a deep thinker.
People need to know what I have to say.
Yeah. Well, Luke 14, Jesus turns to the big crowd and begins to basically tell them all the things that they are signing up for if they continue to follow him. And really, there are three kind of categories of things. One is, he says, if anyone comes to me and doesn't hate his own father, mother, wife, and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, can't be my disciple. So you have this one situation where basically he says, you have to love me more than you love anyone, including yourself. And there will be times, and basically the reason he uses the word hate here is there will be times that loving him as opposed to the world, from the world's perspective, that will look like hate. And we see that all the time in today's culture when we stand against sin and stand for righteousness and all of that. Christians are labeled, you know, hate speech and haters and all this kind of stuff. And we've seen families break apart, friendships break apart because of Christ. Even this past week, I've heard of one marriage, essentially, that was on the rocks because of faith and different things. And so, you know, when you're living this out, it really, this idea of loving Jesus more than anyone, like we can say in our minds, like, hey, I'm going to do that, or I do that. I love Jesus more than anyone. But then when a certain situation in a relationship calls for obedience to Christ and loyalty to Christ over that person, at the end of the day, that is going to create some difficulties. And so thinking about that, like, you know, how should loyalty to Jesus, how should that begin to shape our decisions when expectations maybe of family, friends, coworkers, culture are pulling in another direction? Because we see that all the time where what we say and believe as Christians is almost like, I'll say this, like, I think sometimes from the world's perspective, they are surprised when Christians actually live out what they believe. Like, it's like, okay, it's fine for you to believe the Bible, but keep that in church or keep that in your own family. When you start to actually live that out in day-to-day life, like, you shouldn't do that. You should leave that in church or leave that at home and just accept and be fine with anything in life. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? How should our loyalty to the Lord and his word and all of that shape our day-to-day decisions and interactions with people?
Yeah, I think we know that to follow Jesus is more than just afterwards we begin to tell people more about him, that more than just inviting people to church, more than just changing what our Sunday mornings look like. But really the truth is that it should shape our hearts, should shape our actions, and that can look very different in different things. It could mean that your group of friends are all going to go see a movie, and you really know that your faith to follow Jesus and to be holy doesn't line up with the content in this movie. and you have to make a choice of, am I going to isolate myself from my friends, or should I go there and be a good example on them, or other things of, I've heard of unbelievers who, when they get saved and the rest of their family doesn't believe, that they've had to pass on some family traditions that revolve around activities that could lead to drunkenness or other things that wouldn't honor God. And, it can seem like not a big deal to the world, and why not just let this thing pass by, when we really need to follow our hearts and our convictions. And we see that somewhere in the Bible that some people can do things that, because it doesn't prick their conscience. But if our conscience is pricked, if we say, this really bothers me because I don't feel like it's living out my faith, then we're called to follow our conscience. We're called to follow what we think is going to be the most pleasing to God, even when that goes against what the world, what our family, our friends, our coworkers, all of those groups might try and pull us away from those beliefs.
And I think, we want to honor those relationships that we have and love those people and care for them, but still have our loyalty be to Jesus. And so I think, like, as we're thinking through that, there are certain situations and decisions that we make that are going to be like the obvious outcome or decision that we should make. Well, let me back up. The outcome or decision we should make is obvious because of Scripture. Like, that's going to be a no-brainer. But then there are certain things that require, in a lot of ways, like some godly counsel and just following the Holy Spirit, because not everything is exactly cut and dry. I'll give you some examples. When I was a children's pastor, we had some kids who were coming to church, riding the bus, and there was a girl who I remember probably was around, I would say 11 years old, 12 years old, something like that. And she made a decision to follow Jesus. Like, she wanted to become a Christian. And she had confirmed that decision in her heart, told us she wanted to be baptized, and we were all excited for her. And that was great. Well, anyway, so we said, well, go home, talk to your parents, and we'll schedule you a time to get baptized. Well, her parents didn't want her to get baptized. And, they were like, no, she can't be baptized. I guess from their perspective, maybe they felt like church was more of just, and I'm just thinking out loud here, but maybe just more of like, that's an opportunity for her to do something fun or something. But as far as actually getting spiritual or something like that, we don't really want her to do that. Mm. But she's made that decision. Now, she comes back to us and tells us that my dad doesn't want me to be baptized. Now, granted, she's a child. And so you have this contrast in Scripture, or not contrast, but it's a situation that creates an issue. You see children obey your parents, and then submission to Jesus, a call to be baptized when we make that decision. So that was something that I really kind of thought through. And, for each person, like, if you're in that situation or whatever, as a pastor, maybe somebody else would make a different call. For me at that time, I felt led to tell her, hey, the Lord tells you to honor your parents so long as they're not calling you to sin. At this point, your parents have, said they don't want you to do that. So we're not going to do that right now. But the day you turn 18, you need to be baptized. And that's what I felt led to tell her. I felt like for her to continue to still be able to come to church and her parents to allow her to come to church and those kind of things, we didn't need to do anything to, really anger her parents or anything like that. And so I kind of felt like that was the right way to go about it. And also, I know that the desire of her heart was to be baptized, and I know that Jesus knows that, the Lord knows that. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we navigated that. There's another situation that my wife and I had to navigate one time where um, some close friends of ours at the time. I'll say close friends, not they were family at that time. Some family of ours. One of them decided to uh, engage in a homosexual relationship. They ended up getting married, like homosexual marriage, and obviously we didn't support that. But then they had a like in vitro and had a baby, and they had a baby shower for the baby.
Hmm.
And we were kind of in a conundrum at that point, like, should we give them a gift or not? Like, is the gift supporting the homosexual relationship, or is the gift supporting this baby? And what does that look like to live that out, like as far as Christians? And so that was something that, at the time, my wife and I were not really, like, we kind of saw different perspectives on that. And so we compromised and kind of, I think where we ended up was, we gave a gift, but we didn't attend the shower, the baby shower. But as you live these things out, there are certain things that are going to be obvious that you have to draw a line in the sand. Then there are going to be other things that require discernment and wisdom and guidance and prayer and all of those kind of things. And maybe looking back, you feel like, yeah, I did the right thing. Or maybe looking back, you feel like, well, next time I'd probably handle it a little bit differently. But through all of that, we've got to make sure that we're trying to follow the Bible as closely as we can, even in those difficult moments. I don't know if you've ever had situations like that where it's been kind of difficult to discern, and you've had to maybe talk to people about how you handle, especially, situations with your family, because that's the toughest part is, like, if if it's a friend or coworker or whatever, and they decide to not talk to you again or whatever, that's a bad deal. But when it's family and you still have to see them, that's a tougher thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have an example that I can share at this moment, but I have experienced that pull before. And, the important thing is letting people know that you still love them, and that the decisions that you're making are not necessarily condemning them or judging them in the sense of that you're better than them in any way, but more of, I'm making this decision because I love Jesus and I want to honor him.
Yeah.
And I hope the same for you.
And here's the thing, like, as we do that, if we are truly trying to hold to our faith and, like, live it out, and people know we're Christians, honestly, like, they might be surprised the first time that it happens or something, but, like, people shouldn't be surprised that we would live out our faith. And when they are, it's probably because they've maybe been around some, like, lukewarm Christians or people who are living hypocritically or something like that. And that's what we're trying to, like, push back against, right? As far as, like, how we live in our lives. We want to live authentically and true to the word and those kind of things. And so I think honoring those relationships, we've got to love and care for people and care about their feelings. But also we've got to prioritize the Lord. And so it kind of goes back to what we talked about in church recently about, being prepared to give a defense for the hope that's in you, but doing it with gentleness and respect, and how we care for people and those kind of things. And so, Jesus, when he says here in Luke 14, he uses the word hate, but he's not talking about, like, now I'm going to hate you because I'm a Christian and you're not. Obviously it's about, and there's a place in Matthew where he talks about this. Like, it's just, you have to love them less than you love Jesus. and that includes yourself. And again, that's a very difficult thing to do because loyalty is a big thing in our lives, and care, and I don't know, just all these relationships have all of these like strings, if you will, attached to them that we want to hold on to. But we have to remember to hold on to Jesus more than anything else. Any other thoughts on that?
I know that's an important but a hard thing. But like you said, talking about hating these things, it's really the idea of we're pushing away or rejecting anything being the priority over Jesus. And a lot of these things, we're still going to hold close because Jesus cares about them. Jesus wants us to love and serve our family well, but it's through the love of Jesus, that priority, that lens first. And if we put anything else above that, then that's when we're not walking with the Lord the way we ought to be.
The next verse says, whoever doesn't bear his own cross and come after me can't be my disciple. Now, this phrase of bearing his own cross, this is about, this is about suffering. We have to be willing to suffer with Christ. And there are some other passages like this in Luke that talks about, like, Jesus says, if anyone wants to follow me, like come after me, he has to take up his cross daily, right? Do that daily. And we've seen that, I believe that was Luke 9 that talks about that. But, this is something like that I think that a lot of people maybe who are new to Christianity, or maybe the only version of Christianity that they've seen is from like the TV preachers and things like that. I mean, you look at some of the different ones on TV that are the most popular. Like I think about like Joel Osteen, Joyce Meyer, T.D. Jakes, all these people who are like, have the biggest followings. One of the big things they're pushing is what is labeled the prosperity gospel, which essentially is this idea like you come to Jesus and suddenly you're going to get like health, wealth, prosperity. Your life's going to be so much better here in this earth and things like that. And certainly we know that life is better with Jesus. But from a like physical, earthly perspective, that's not always the case. Like, from the outside looking in, as far as the world looking at the thing, like Christians still go through suffering, like as far as like just general suffering in the world. Like everybody has difficult times that they live in because we live in a broken world. But then you add on to that, Christians go through suffering a lot of times, like just because of Christ. You take these relationships that we talked about, for example, that's a form of suffering when people, push back against you or come down on you or whatever, or abandon you or whatever because of Jesus. I mean, that's a form of suffering and pain. I mean, that's obviously you feel that, but then sometimes it's a physical pain or something like that we have to go through. You see that in the New Testament church. And so how do you see that his promise of suffering and all these, like you have to be willing to take up your cross and to bear it, bear your own cross, if you will. How does that challenge like the prosperity gospel and what a lot of people think is like, man, I'm just going to follow Jesus and things going to be easier, or I'm always going to be safe, like you think about a lot of our prayers, a lot of times it's for health and safety and prosperity and all of those things. And certainly like we should pray when we're sick and pray for all these, like the Bible talks about these things, but how does this challenge the assumption that it's always going to be that way?
Yeah, I feel like in the sermon, something that you pointed out that was helpful for me, and I was thinking about this is, I think now that we're on the other side of what Jesus has done, at this point when he was telling this to the crowd, he had not died on the cross yet. And so we automatically go to, Jesus, he sacrificed and died on the cross. And so we're called to sacrifice our lives and everything. But when you pointed out on Sunday, the shame that they would have thought about that, wrapped up in that image of the cross and the pain that they would go through. I think that we have to realize that it's more than just sacrificing our life, because we might think of, oh, I'm sacrificing my time, or I'm sacrificing maybe the occupation that I want to do, or this or that. But we might be called to sacrifice, everyone viewing us in the way we want to be viewed, right? The reputation that we have. We might be sacrificing the comfort. We might be sacrificing just the way that we truly live our day-to-day lives with those around us. And I think that Jesus' promise that we will suffer should change the way that we view how life is going to go. I think it not only does it challenge like the health and wealth of, if we follow Jesus, it's not going to be all riches and all these things. But I think I found in my life, I've never believed in the health and wealth gospel. But when I have suffered, there have been these thoughts that come up of, what have I done wrong? Right? I have, not in my best moment, but when I'm in these depths of this suffering, whatever I'm going through, I've thought to myself, well, man, I must not be a good enough Christian, or I must not have done something right to the Lord. I've done something wrong, or what have I done to deserve this? And I think this reinforces for us and a reminder that it's a possibility I didn't do anything wrong necessarily for that particular thing, that I'm just experiencing the suffering that Christ promises that we will suffer.
Yeah, and I think you see that same thing in the Bible, like Jesus pushing back against those assumptions when the disciples are like, hey, what did this guy or his parents do that he was born blind? And Jesus said, well, actually nothing. It was so that way my glory could be on display. And basically, like, this situation has come about so I could heal this guy, essentially. You see different situations that are suffering, if you will, just because we live in a broken world. And so, as we think about those types of suffering, you mentioned suffering in relationships and things like that. I was thinking about, different times that I've seen people who maybe in their business, for whatever reason, like they stood up for Christ for different things, and then somebody decided to post about them on Facebook and just like, tear them down because they stood up for their faith, and they felt like this was somebody hating in their business or whatever. And then the next thing you know, people come out of the woodwork, not only making comments, but going to like Google to put negative reviews and like basically just trying to do everything they can to destroy that business and take them down. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think in those moments, that could be a form of suffering that people endure because of Christ. I mean, you see also similar things about churches sometimes. Somebody has an experience at church where they show up and they hear the truth of the word and they don't like it, so they blast the church on Facebook or wherever, and then the next thing you know, people show up and not show up, but people go online and start ripping that church apart. And I still think it's kind of wild that you can give like Google reviews for a church, like give them a certain amount of stars and those kind of things. But it is what it is, and so people start doing that. And then the next thing you know, when people search your church on Google, it's a hateful church and unfriendly according to the reviews, things like that. And sometimes, people just don't like Christians standing for truth and what they believe in. And so that's the cost of doing business, so to speak. I mean, in earthly terms. But, we have to do everything we can really to prepare ourselves before those costs hit. And that's why Jesus says, like, count the cost. And so what would you say to somebody, like, just, in a sentence or two, like, how can you prepare yourself to count this cost before you get there? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, oftentimes when we're in God's Word, when we're praying, that God gives us His Spirit and strength with how to handle those moments. And even when I'm talking with in our student ministry with our students, I often tell them, don't wait until in the moment to decide where your personal line is. And like we've talked about, some things in Scripture are clear and pretty black and white, and so we don't have to. But there are other things that are a little bit more of a conscience thing and convictional thing. But don't try and make those kinds of decisions in the moment. But think about, when we talk about, dating relationships and everything, decide how you're going to honor the Lord personally before you get into those relationships. You don't want to be navigating that in the heat of the moment versus before, when you can think about it with God's Word and with godly wisdom from others and those sorts of things. And so it's always good, if you can, some situations just come up you can never see, right? But others, we can think about, well, what do we feel like we can truly follow the Lord in these moments?
And one of the things I think is super important is to consider what you're saying without saying it. Like, what I mean by that is, by our actions or the things that we do or don't do, we are essentially saying something without saying it, right? And so we have to think about, hey, what does me showing up with this group or doing this thing with this group or, whatever or not, what is that saying about my faith and about my love for the Lord, my belief in Scripture and all that without me saying it? Those are some things to consider as well, because I think a lot of times it goes through our minds, well, I don't actually support that, but I love those people or I care about them and I don't want to hurt them. So they know that I'm a Christian. They know I don't support it. But when I go to be with them in this thing or go, whatever, I'm just there for them. And in our minds, we're thinking they know that I don't actually support this thing. But that's not always the case. And a lot of times we're saying that we do support something, or, hey, we're right here with you, or what, like maybe unintentionally saying that because we're choosing to associate ourselves with something or someone who's participating in that. And, it's kind of the old adage, like guilty by association. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're guilty for something that somebody else has done wrong, but, people will view us as being a part of that and all of that. So we got to make sure with all of that we are doing and living out what we claim to believe. One last thing he mentions here, it says, he goes on to say, verse 33, in the same way, therefore, every one of you who doesn't renounce all his possessions can't be my disciple. I want to quickly mention clearly here, these over and over say, you do these things or don't do these things, like you can't be my disciple. And what he's saying here is, like, essentially, you can't be a Christian. You can't follow me. You can't be associated with me. And so that's why this is the cost of following Jesus. And so here he's saying we have to be willing to surrender everything for him. That nothing, like we can't hold on to anything and say, I will never give this up. Never be willing to give this up because of Jesus. I was kind of thinking about an illustration I didn't share on Sunday. Let me workshop it a little bit with you guys and see what you think for this, all right? I don't know that it's the greatest illustration. I was thinking about this. So I think part of the reason we have this mentality about, like, holding on to my possessions is you'll see why I didn't share this on Sunday, all right?
Straight off the cutting room.
But I think the analogy is there, but just it's kind of a dumb illustration. So let's imagine that when you were born, and your home, like your family was squatting in that home.
Okay.
All right. You're living in a house that's not yours.
Okay.
But as you grow up, your perception is that it's yours. They haven't told you that you're squatters.
Okay.
The homeowner shows up one day, says, "Get out of my house." Your immediate reaction is, "This is my house. I've lived here my whole life. Like, we've put decorations on the wall. We've done, like, this is our house. What's this guy talking about?" But the reality is it's his house. And I think it's a very similar situation. Like, as we live our lives here, we've lived with the perception that all of this stuff is ours. And then when we make Jesus the Lord of our lives, we come to realize, no, the whole time it's actually been his. And so it feels like we're giving up something that's ours. But in reality, we're giving him back what is rightfully his. What do you think about that analogy? I mean, it's a little weird,
It's a little weird.
but it works.
I like it.
Well, just I need to know more about squatters' rights and their laws. That's what
Is it
makes
one
me
of
think
those
about
things?
it. I need
Is
to-
there something like if you live there long enough, it's yours?
Yeah,
Like eminent, it's not eminent domain. What's that called?
I don't know.
That's what I'm thinking.
Is that
about.
real though?
I need to go do some research.
Is
you
that
know?
real though?
I mean, that's why they're that's.
But I
real.
didn't specify how many years old you were.
I need to know what state what state did I grow up in? you
See,
know?
that I'm glad I didn't share this illustration for people like you that
Yeah.
overanalyze the illustrations. You know.
It just brought up more questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
But
no, I
you
see
get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I see.
And from the perspective, you can see how what I'm getting at. Like, we feel like it's ours, but in actuality, it's not.
yeah, it's a total switch of perspective. We think about that old hymn, I surrender all. And what does it truly mean to make everything in our life the Lord's? And that's completely different than our sinful selves our nature is made to be when we begin life.
Yeah. So as you're thinking about this, what it looks like to live for Jesus and to live out your faith, my hope is that for all of us, that not only we will count the cost, but we'll come to realize it's worth it. And I mentioned Sunday, a lot of the great blessings that come from knowing Jesus, if you just take this passage, I mean, it does thin out the crowd. But then you go into what we're going to go into this Sunday with Luke 15 and like the parable of the lost son, and seeing what you get like when you turn to the Lord and the celebration and the inheritance and all the amazing things. I mean, we know that it's kind of like, I was thinking about this too. Essentially what we're talking about is, I think some people view, for instance, like finance. Some people want the instant gratification, like the quick return. And some people are more invested for the long term, right? And typically the long game is the better result because it not only compounds more and all of that, but it's more secure and all of that from the volatility and stuff. Similarly, I think like when we live for this world and the here and now, we might feel like, yeah, this is great and all but it's all going to go away and it's all going to be worthless. Come to my Wednesday night class. We're going to talk about that on Ecclesiastes. But anyway, when we go and say, hey, we're going to give everything away for the kingdom, it's kind of like playing, it's not a game, but investing in the long term, if you will, and saying, hey, we want the hope of eternity and being part of the kingdom more than we want the here and now. So yeah, I think all that's super important. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think that's great.
Well, we've enjoyed being here with you. I don't know which camera I'm on. We've had some camera trouble here, and one camera we started with is not here right now, so I'm here. We are glad that you are here with us and have tuned in. We'd love for you to come to Beacon Hills sometime if you don't have a church home. Sunday morning, 9:15, we have grow groups, and 10:30 we have worship. Like I said, we've been going through the book of Luke together. If you want to join us this Sunday, we'll be in Luke 15. super cool passage. Parable of the lost son, the prodigal son, some people call it. But it's very, very cool and encouraging for all of us who realize, like, hey, we don't have anything to offer the Lord, and we come to Him, and He loves us, and is waiting for us to come to Him. So, super excited about that. We have Wednesday nights that have started this week. We hope you'll join us next week for that at 6 p.m. on Wednesdays as well. Something for all ages. A lot going on here, and like I said, if you don't have a church home, we'd love to see you. Joel, been good hanging out, man. Like the Dragon Cup. Look forward to seeing you use that soon. I know you're looking forward to it.
Me too. It's been good to be back.
Jake, you've done a great job over there, man, on the buttons and dials.
Thank you.
You all have a great week.